Hello, this is Silas with I Know Great People back after some time. Oh, I don't know if I'm actually going to post this after this other interview that I've done with someone else, but in this bringing this series back, I'm glad to have my friend Steven here. He'll introduce himself a bit more, but he's the one who launched off the whole I Know Great People. What was it, like 5 years ago or something?
Yeah, I think so.
This one, it might have been, actually, it might have been longer. Wasn't it like 2017? It might have been almost a decade ago. No, I think I started that after. Okay. Regardless,
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
check that probably when we're talking over here. But thank you for taking your time to participate and come and listen to this and watch this. My intention with this series is to share information about what people do versus what people think they do. And I want to bridge the gap between perception and knowledge, as I believe that the more we know about ourselves, the greater the things we can accomplish together. And that's just, I've also just been thinking, like, as I've been growing up, I just constantly thought, even when I was much younger in high school, I remember thinking, like, I'm probably going to know someone that does everything. And as I've gotten older, decades from then, it's come kind of true. And I want to have this platform and other systems to set up stories and have all the great people that I've met tell you about the great things that they're doing. And then here is again Stephen, so you can tell us your full name or anything else. The occupation or pastime that we're going to be talking about today, the thing that we talked about before, and how we know each other. You just give a kind of quick thing over that because it can also jump back to the previous I Know Great People or the previous 40 or so videos we've done together. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. So my name is Stephen Thomas Kirschner, as it says on the inscription here. I've been working in restaurants for the last, decade and almost 2 decades now. I did took a little bit of a break during COVID. I did some day trading as well, but I'm mostly a restaurant guy. I wanted to be a chef. Went from kitchen to front of house. I went to Culinary Institute of America. Currently, I'm managing. I'm going to start a new position soon. We'll probably get into that. The way Silas and I met originally was that our mutual friend Dina actually posted about needing help with a video we were doing. So she reached out. Silas was one of the people who responded. So we met, I think it was at Union Square Park. This was like, I'm trying to remember if this was like 2015, 2016, something. It was a while, it's over a decade ago now, but it was, we've stayed in touch. I mean, Silas and I used to hang out in the city. He's moved back. I was upstate. I'm back. Things have changed, but we've kept in touch and, lucky to keep these conversations going. Yep.
Yeah. So we had some shared interests with like, oh, he's worked in the food service industry, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. He was out of a job for some time, but then he really quick in a turnaround, just a testament to how quality of a person Stephen
Mhm.
is and what he's done. He's had history in that. Several different series we've had. We've had a series called Dish You on Dish, where Stephen would go
Mhm.
around to different places in New York City. Then he'd come back and tell me about all the delicious food, and we
Hmm.
talk about the food and the details. We had one series called You Are What You Consume, which was talking
Yeah.
more about food in general, going to the whole thing, like not just the food itself, the physical, actual fats, carbohydrates, and proteins that we intake, but the culture behind certain foods, how foods are developed, the ideas, and we also go into philosophy, politics, and other kind of things. And that there's
Mhm.
one we've talked about different sort of relationships, and he'll be back on very soon. Might even record that after this to talk about some other things that have happened in his life, not just losing a job, getting back in job, but also getting into the whole married life. So congratulations on both. It seems the first like
Thank you.
the first like recording post that. No, we might have discussed post that. Anyway, so this is the first like
Well, I should highlight. I think this is our first recording in the new apartment because before I lived in that rooming house in Hell's Kitchen for like a decade and a half, and then she and I finally moved together to Astoria. We're very happy. We have a studio now. It's not too far from her job. Me, it's fairly close to Manhattan. The one downside, the transportation's a little tougher because when I lived in Hell's Kitchen, it's Midtown Manhattan, so
yeah.
everything accesses right there. Whereas here, it's like almost a mile each way to each train. So that's a little annoying, but I mean, it's doable. It's not the end of the world. But I mean, rent is reasonably priced. We have more space. We have like a little kitchen area. We don't have to share a bathroom. That was annoying. It's a safe neighborhood. Like I don't worry about her walking home. And she has a better job now, and she got off those overnight shifts, which were really tough on her. And I mean, honestly, she's happier, better rested. So yeah, it's just much better overall. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to be talking specifically about it's a general manager job. It's a manager job.
So
What
so I'm
is
I'm
the
more
title?
like I'm kind of like AGM trying to become GM. Like I'm in that position right now.
Okay. So I think in general we'll talk about that. So the first question will be list two or three, or tell me two or three things that someone would like about what you do. So if somebody's looking to apply for the food industry, specifically for the managerial levels, what do you think are two or three things that, let's say you've already had experience in food service, or you just, or you in a different field and you want to switch, but we'll get to that later. So yeah, there's two to three things that you think are positive that you enjoy about that job because you have some previous experience in managerial level. So you can also
Of
just
course.
tell us a bit about what you experienced then. Yeah.
Sure. So I think in general, people like me who love the industry, who want to keep doing it, possibly want to have their own place or at least run a group or something to that effect. I think we just like being in charge. Like we like having a more active role in the business. Whereas as a server or cook, you're just kind of following what someone else tells you. Whereas as a manager, you get to make the decisions. Now, obviously, there's more pressure, there's more stress. I like one thing I liked about my last position. My last position was actually my first general manager position, and one of the things I liked was that I got to pretty much do everything. So everything from like going to profit and loss meetings, doing tip sheets, pest control, maintenance, all that. Like it gives you really good insight into how the restaurant operates on every level. And I've told a few people recently that I think it was good experience for me because I got that like bigger picture view. Whereas as a floor manager, it's kind of like here, go watch this section, and that's like what you have to do, and maybe like one or two other office positions. Whereas here, because the company I just left, every place just had one GM, so it's like you had to pretty much do everything, which was very good training for me.
Okay. This next place, you don't have to tell us the name of the place, but is it the same as the previous one? Because I remember we talked a bit about the previous one. That was you can also just give us an overview of how most restaurant is like you can tell us, is this most restaurants where there's a manager group, they handle multiple, because the last one had what, five under the group? But the place you've been employed, is it like a single owned place, like a mom and pop shop? Like, can you tell us the difference of like of why you should seek to be employed by certain structures that are involved in food service industry in restaurants?
Yeah, so there's different. I mean, there's strengths and weaknesses to both. Like, so the last one I had owned, they owned several restaurants and they were expanding to more. So the good thing with that is there's upward mobility and they can move you around. Like a common thing that will happen is someone will be, let's say, like assistant general manager in one place. They open a new place, they become GM at the new spot. So it's like they're rewarding you for sticking around, but at the same time, like obviously more is expected of you as well. So that's a possibility. This is a smaller standalone restaurant. Now, we're talking about opening for brunch. We're talking about, he's actually talking about opening a second location. So it's like something like that would be cool because it's one of those things that, like, okay, if this goes well and I play a role in that, obviously it's good for me immediately. And then longer term, I can say, okay, I played a role in that, depending on how long I stick with the company. Now who knows? I mean, I just started. I don't have any predictions yet, but usually I think it's a good rule of like, you stick with a place like, and once you can't move up anymore, that's when it's time to leave. Like for example, as you know, before my last job, I worked at Bobo for almost 3 years, and I was considering leaving there because the thing was the positions above me were filled and the people above me had no signs of leaving. So I don't want to do the same job for 5 years or something. What's the point? Now I stuck around there because of the takeover with the Star Group and all that. But what ended up happening was they shut down, which led to me getting my last job. So circumstances were a bit different. But for me, especially in this job search, I'm looking at, is there a place where I can grow and move upward? Like one thing, for example, here is when I applied, it was more of a floor manager position, but my new boss even said, he goes, you strike me more as AGM trying to be GM. I said, yeah, it's my goal. And he said, look, I'll help train you that way. And he actually is putting me in charge of the bar program, which is cool. So I'm going to get to have a role in cocktails. I'm going to do ordering. So I'm going to get to see that side of it as well, which will be very good from my experience.
Ooh, yeah. So with that, do you think like yeah, that's kind of interesting because you go in and apply and then somebody sees you through that process. So now with the actual process itself of applying for jobs, I need to do much better at that. Just been like I'm looking to start like launch my studio on full on, but I just need to just even just get online and Indeed and things like that, and just apply for some jobs here and there, design stuff, so I can just be getting some money coming in. Something I suck at doing. I need to do more at. But then there's that whole thing where people advise like when you're at a job, that's the best time to apply for other
Yeah,
jobs.
it is.
And yeah, and so what is something that you think was positive regardless of, I know there's the fear of the rejection. You go in and you're like, oh, people tell you no, people tell you no, and that's something that people might not really want to experience in that whole process. But what are some positive experiences you had just from the last a couple of weeks applying for jobs. And also, I think we also had to talk about the pandemic when it was happening, because of course, Stephen is in New York City. That was one of the main world global spots of a lot of shenanigans going on with all that. We haven't forgotten all that stuff yet, but we had some talks there about how the food industry kind of closed down because the food industry, of course,
Yeah.
worked a lot by people just walking by and like, I'm going to go to the restaurant. Or it was the places that had a lot of limitations in what you could actually do. Yes, there was a whole like you wear a mask, but then all of a sudden when you sit down, and all of a sudden mask is not needed. Okay, we don't have to like rehash all that now. But there was some time coming off of work at that time, and then when you went back over there, were you look? I'm not remembering quite. You didn't have to apply for jobs because the place you were. Did you just go back to the place that you were, or just yeah? So tell me the experience that you had applying for jobs when you're looking for jobs after the shutdown in the pandemic versus now, and what are some positives from actually going through that process of applying and talking to people and getting input back?
Well, you and I had talked a little bit about this before we started, and I wanted to address it's interesting because my work history has been a combination of jobs on my own, but also positions through other people. So, for example, my first position with the retirement home, I got that on my own. My externship for culinary school, I just went, I applied there, I trailed there, I got that on my own. My first kitchen job here, Barbaloo, that was on my own. Seasonal, the next place after that, we did a whole video on that. That I got on my own. Eddie and the Wolf was part of the same company, so basically I just transferred over. Batello, my first front of house job, I actually got through someone I met at Seasonal, so that was helpful. And then Netta, the sushi place, my first manager job, I actually got through someone I met at Batello. Philidia, I actually got because I just applied on culinary agents out of the blue. And I started as a front waiter and became a manager. I was a front waiter very briefly. Then that's how I met Santo, who I worked with recently. And then COVID happened, things shut down, and then I did my trading for a bit and things, but things kind of went downhill with that. So the way I reached out to Tanya Bastianich, and then I asked about coming back to Felidia. They didn't know what was going to happen to Felidia. So then she forwarded my resume to Bobo, and then Solomon, my former GM, reached out to me, and that's how I went there. So that was kind of a transfer within a company as well. But like, I mean, I still had to go in and meet and talk to him and everything. But like, because I had worked for the same company, that was easier. And then I knew that was a case of kind of my reputation preceding me because first time I met Joe Bastianich, I told him like, "Oh, I worked at Felidia." He's like, "Oh yeah, Tanya told me about you and all that." So that was kind of easier because I just moved around within the same company. And then when Bobo shut down, I got the position at UA Foods through Santo, who is director of operations through the company. He and I had sort of been peripherally in touch via Instagram over the last like decade or so. Maybe not that long. Actually, no, maybe like 6 7 years, maybe not a decade, but it like we sort of peripherally been in touch. So he reached out to me, and then after I left this job I actually just applied to on my own and went in person. So you know, it's like my experience has been kind of a mix of connections, but also some of my own applications. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent about that. I think your original question was what was positive about this, or
Yeah, what's positive from your experience of going through the application process and yeah, so just what's you already mentioned some of the differences because those ones you're more like jumping from one to the other from knowing the people, but you talked to a few places that you didn't actually get this time, right? So what were some positives even you thought even if though they didn't hire you, what can you think of some positives through the process that you experienced with them?
Well, definitely a learning experience. Like I applied to this one group, Picora Bianca. It's Italian. It's more of like I guess upscale casual, not fine dining. I actually did 4 interviews with them, and I got turned down, which like was people were surprised at that because they're like, "Wow, you went that far." And I think in that case, everyone was super nice with me. I enjoyed every interview. I think it was just like they wanted someone with more high volume experience, and like you know, my background, as you know, is more fine dining generally. So one of the lessons from this is I have to find places that are more tailored to my background because like where I'm working now is an Italian spot and the gentleman who owns it actually he's big fans of Lydia. He used to watch Mario, all that, so that kind of helped because like it's relevant to my background. Whereas if I apply to some like high volume place, like I actually had one interview, not this time, but first time when Bobo shut down, and the guy even said to me off the bat, he's like, "Oh, I see you've done mostly fine dining. We're looking for someone with more high volume casual experience." And then like since then, I've kind of noticed that if I apply to these more casual places, like that's kind of the challenge because like they're looking for it because you know my friend put it well recently. He said, think of like the high volume casual versus fine dining. Think of it as like certain tasks require an army, certain tasks require a team of special forces, different, you know, different units, different strengths, different requirements. And it's like what works well in one may not work in the other. So it's like people who work in high volume, like, they can turn a dining room, they can move fast, but they might lack a certain attention to detail. And then other people, if they do fine dining, go to the more casual, they get overwhelmed because they're not used to feeding hundreds of people. So it's like the skills don't always translate. I mean, there are people who are adaptable. Have seen people who do both, but it makes sense that not everyone can do both well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of makes sense. You already answered. So I'm going to pivot to the next question, which is two to three things someone may dislike about what you do.
Yeah.
And so dislike as a managerial level, of course, because I'm sure you've probably experienced some people who've been in the food service industry at the more like, not the manager, what would you call the level where it's like you're dealing directly with the customers, customer facing, is that the customer facing part? And like you're managing,
Well,
you're
front
between
front of house front of
in front
house
of
in
house. So
general refers to, yeah, a working dining room. Yeah.
all right, so like let's say somebody's front of house and they're kind of thinking like, oh, it's gonna be great. I'm gonna become a manager. So you can tell us some things that you think from your experience going from front of house and in there, you're like, okay, I still don't like this. I didn't like this at the beginning. I still don't like it now. And also just some of the differences between if somebody's already in like in the fine dining, maybe I don't know, like that's what I'm saying. Like how much experience do you know? How much what are the differences? There are some things that like if you like this in high volume, you're probably not gonna like it in fine dining. Or if there's something in fine dining you don't like, maybe if you went to high volume, it might be better. So if
Well,
I don't
so
know if that's too confusing of a question. Yeah.
high volume, some people just love the energy. Like they love, like, oh, we have a full dining room. There's a crowd. We turn it again. Move around, like be busy. And I'm like that to an extent. But with fine dining, for me personally, like I like the tasting menus. I like the more intricate plating. I like the emphasis on quality over quantity. Like I'd rather have a few tables that all get these composed plates and have 200 people that just get like a plate of pasta. That's how I am personally. Um, that's one factor. I think some people think fine dining is too uptight. Like for example, one of my mentors, I don't know how if he'd like me saying this. I'm not going to mention names or places, but like he talked about how he worked in more in fine dining, and he said how he started getting away from it because he said, like, for example, like some of it was too pretentious for him. Like he talked about how he got in trouble because he wrote like his phone number for someone on like a paper napkin and gave it to them, and like things like that. And he's like it's just they're very rigid. Things have to be done a certain way. You can't deviate at all. And he was saying he kind of got fed up with it after that. And he worked in a lot of fine dining places, like some of the top places, but he was saying he just didn't like that because he feels like you're just going entirely by their script. And look, I see both sides of it. Like, again, to make the military comparison, you're a soldier, you're special forces or whatever. You have to adapt to a certain extent, but you still have to follow the main plan. You can't keep improvising on the fly. You have to do what they tell you. And it's kind of a similar thing here. And like, I think he tried to go to more of that upscale casual route where like you have nicer plates, but at the same time, like there's a little more flexibility like that. Like I don't have to be suit and tie. Yes, sir. No, sir. Like, some people just, they don't like that environment ultimately.
Okay. And of course, the key thing is this: it is a pay. Is there a discrepancy? What do you think normally decides the pay? Is it what you're doing? Is there a difference between fine dining and of course the high volume? What are some of the kind of deciding factors of how much you can
Well,
request?
some of the high volume places actually pay a little better, and I was talking to my friend about that. But of course, the challenge is it's definitely going to be more stressful because you're feeding a lot more people. I'd applied to a few hotels as well, and the thing is with hotels is that remember that a lot of them serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they're open every day of the year. So it's very likely you're working holidays. They try to do the 5 days, 2 days off, but of course the concern too is that like if someone quits and like you might be doing like lunch and dinner or something. And like one hotel I interviewed at, they're open from 7 in the morning till 2 in the morning. So it's like that's kind of a concern too. Like, okay, are you going to have to be there every day if they're short staffed or someone is on vacation? Whereas like one thing with the restaurants is like, okay, the hours are pretty set. So it's like dinner, maybe sometimes lunch, and usually they try to divide it up accordingly. So it's like you're not there all the time. Eh.
Okay, one last thing people don't like because I think it's very key. Like we were just talking about this before, how a lot of content online is like focused on things that are bad, which for a good reason, and it kind of sticks out to people. But what is one thing that you think? All right, we can get back to this question later. Okay. All right. So, what are some occupations that you think are the opposite from the managerial in food service industry? It might actually, yeah. So, what do you think is kind of opposite from what you do in general?
Well, I would say even within the industry itself, some of the lower positions, like you go to one of these really high end places, like you pretty much just do one or two like prep items. Like some of these very high end places, it's like come in here and pick herbs, like that's all you do. It's kind of like mindless, like it's kind of mindless prep. Or like my one of my old sous chefs, extern at the French Laundry, we've talked about Thomas Keller, and like all he did was like cut brunoise, like the vegetables very small, like that's all he did. So it's like you're kind of just doing that like tedious, repetitive task. Now, obviously, you're doing it with the hope of moving up, but the point is, if you're on the higher level, you're making more decisions. So, like, you're the one deciding what goes in the food. You're talking to chef. You're seeing the P&L, all that. So, like, one thing I like about my position is it's more of a thinking role. Like, you get to have a role in those decisions. Whereas these, it's like you're just kind of following a script with someone else. And my new boss, he actually worked in kitchens as well, and he was saying that's one of the reasons he got tired of it was like you're just kind of following like here, just make someone else's recipes according to what they have and all that. And like I get it, like okay, you're representing the brand, you need consistency. They want to come back, it has to taste the same, be identical every time you get it. But at the same time, that gets boring after a while because you feel like you're just kind of following out someone else's script over and over. Whereas if you have your own place, you're kind of writing your own script. I'd put it that way. Huh.
Yeah, but that can appeal to certain people because certain people you might have other interests outside of your, and you're pretty
Yeah.
much just you want to go in and check out, kind of zone out and just be told do this, do that. So while you're
Yeah.
doing that, maybe you're focusing on some script or some movie you want to do or something else in your mind. And then some
Yeah.
people want to be more hands-on with actual jobs. So I think yeah, this goes into the next question. So also going back to the one before this, what are some misconceptions about what you do? And this is more, I think, consider this. I'd like to ask this from the point of view of not just the people who come to eat, but also somebody who would be in the food service industry trying to say like, okay, I want to go from front of house to like back of house. I want to like upgrade or move to this other because it's not necessarily upgrade because it's very symbiotic sort of relationship that you guys have. So what is something that you're like, okay, if you think you're going to leave this behind by going back of house, don't expect that. Like, what are some of the negative things or some of the things that you like? Don't leave what you're doing to join this because you think this does not exist there. I don't know if that really is. I need to think of a better way to ask that question. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like obviously with back of house, you don't have to deal with guests. And the thing is, like, I've met people who are like that. Like, they just want to like kind of go in the corner and like prep their own thing. They don't want to talk to people. All that. Like,
Mhm.
they talk about how certain bakers like that work because it's like they come in very early, they work by themselves, they leave early. Like, they just like that environment where they're kind of left alone. Whereas they don't want to talk to people unless they're either like more, I guess broadly speaking, more introverted types. Like they want to talk to friends or people they like, but they don't like to talk to people in general. Whereas like I'm definitely more extroverted. Like I'll strike up conversations with strangers. So for me, like that's more suited to my personality. um we were talking, it was funny with one of my previous bartenders, how the place I used to work at was talking about doing a commissary idea where they would prep things and send them out. And he was saying he wanted that job because he could just come in, work by himself, and leave and like not talk to anyone. So like there are people who want that, and like if you go from the kitchen to the front, you won't talk to guests, which can be good and bad depending on your personality. Um, and then one thing I liked is that going from the kitchen to the front is that I just feel like there's more mental stimulation in the front because you can talk to people, you can make friends, you can do all that. Whereas again, the kitchen, it's kind of here, do this repetitive task over and over, and it's like unless like there are people who are like, oh, I love cutting vegetables or whatever. I mean, you do great for you, but it's like I don't know, I like. But the thing with me is like I feel like I kind of learned something like that, and I just get bored of it. So it's like there's no point in doing it over and over.
Okay. So now with moving between those two places, you had that experience, but then now leaving that, now going to the managerial level, I'm guessing that if you thought like, okay, I'm tired of doing this with front of house, so I'm going to go back of into the kitchen, and you let go of those things, or vice versa. But then I'm guessing at the managerial level, if those things get big enough, they eventually get kicked up with you to you, so you're dealing with both the negatives and the positives of both parts, right? Because you have to interact and manage between what's happening to the two of them. If you don't like talking to people, you're not going to escape that by becoming manager. Because if
No,
something
no.
gets problematic enough, they'll kick it up to you, and then you'll have to talk to them. If you don't like, if you enjoy talking to people, there's going to be some situations where you're going to be drawn in where for a week because of what you need to do, you're not going to be facing any actual customers. You're going to be in the back handling things there, right? So that's kind of something that you do at managerial level, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things with managing is that you have to deal with con you know upset guests. You have to deal with, employees not getting along, um, employees not wanting to do things, all that. Like, two employees are fighting. You have to be the one who sort of puts out that fire. Like, that can be a challenge. And I think it's also, you know, interacting with different people. Like, you have people, let's say, from developing countries who don't like having a female manager, so like they're going to resist if they tell her what to do. So then like you have to navigate that. You have these Gen Z kids who are offended by everything, so you have to kind of navigate that carefully. And it's kind of funny now because like, all right, I'm 37 now, and I talk to people around my age and older, and we talk about how like we used to get screamed at, the stuff we would joke about. Like, you can't do any of that anymore. And that's the thing with managing these younger kids is like, you have to say, like, you have to do things in a way where it's like, all right, we have to correct your mistake, but you can't like scream at everyone every 2 seconds.
Yeah, which I think we both agree with our with our preference for like non-aggression principle, peaceful parenting, that type of thing. That's definitely a positive thing to do. But then some of this is coming from a lack of structure. Not yelling
Yeah.
doesn't mean coddling. Like, but they come
Yeah.
to a point where there's been coddling and they haven't been given the structure where they can't even deal with just criticism. Like, constructive
Yeah.
criticism is something that they can't necessarily take. So that must be kind of tough trying to cross those things because I have a friend who I want to bring on. He's into rugby and coaching. We were talking about like peacefully coaching because we both played American football together, and that's been a common thing with American football, the yelling and whatnot. But like, there's ways to communicate within that. But then you normally have to build that up in a certain way. There's certain mentality that will be available for that. So yeah, that must be a bit of a clash trying to work with that.
Well, like, for example, somebody I used to work with was telling me a story where like he was telling this girl, when in higher end settings, you're supposed to either place the plate or clear either from the right with the right or left with the left. The idea is that you're reaching around the person, you're not elbowing them. He told the girl, he said, when you're pouring water, you should pour from the right with the right. She said, "Why are you picking on me?" And I was like, that's like a basic service standard. Like, you do that in any high end restaurant, they're gonna pull you aside and like, So it's just, but that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what we're dealing with. And then the other thing I learned too, to your point about structure, is like one of the things, and Santo used to hammer this home to me a lot, is that um, we're very big on due process as far as like write-ups and documentation and all that. And I've sort of changed on this because I used to be more off the cuff on things. But the problem is you need documentation because the point of reprimanding someone isn't just to bust them. It's supposed to stop the bad behavior and help them improve. And you have to at least like communicate to them that's the intention, and then they have to help them improve. Now, if they don't improve, that's on them, and then it becomes more write-ups, possible termination, depending on the situation. But it's also covering yourself because these days, as you know, there are a lot of lawsuits. There are, wrongful termination lawsuits, slander lawsuits, all that. So you want to cover your bases, especially as a manager, because like if someone comes in late a lot, you can say like, look, you need to get here on time. Here are all the times you clocked in late. It happens again. Okay, here's a write up. It happens again. And then if they say something, be like, look, we discussed it. Here's this email about this. Here's the write up. And then it's like they can't say like, oh, I was fired out of the blue or for no reason because you have the paper trail. Like, another story that happened recently, again, I won't mention names, but like we had a situation where a friend of mine works for one company. One of our mutual friends got fired, and our mutual friend was accused of some things. And my friend says, oh, they had a whole rap sheet on him. And my question is like, why does the rap sheet even exist? There shouldn't be a list of things you've done wrong, then they're firing you, because if you did something wrong to someone, you're not protecting those people, you're not stopping the bad behavior, you're not helping him improve, and then it's like you're just kind of nuking him at once with all the bad things you did. And then that comes across like you're not enforcing the rules, you're just enforcing the rules when it's convenient to get rid of him. Like, even earlier in my career, I worked in a place where there was a guy who was fired for something profane, but the official reason he was fired was that he was late 37 times. And I'm like, why did you wait till 37 to say something? And it was like, because they weren't enforcing the rules, they wanted that like official reason. But again, it's like, what about all the other people who came in late less than that and got yelled at and everything, but you just let it slide with him? Like, you can't run things like that.
Yeah, and these are just human group dynamics that exist in different places.
Yeah.
They might express themselves in a specific way due to some food service peculiarities, but since it's still human beings in there, those things are still going to exist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we move on to the next question. Here we have uh, are there any courses, classes, or other forms of learning that specifically helped you to do what you do? And then, are there any other things that you missed that you would suggest someone should do? So this, I think, now keep in mind. Let's say somebody is in a lower level and wants to get to manager and then the food service industry. What are some things that you would suggest they start doing already? And also, let's say somebody is managing in some other job, not necessarily food service, and you can also tell us how often this happens. I don't know if I asked in the first one, where how often can somebody come from outside of the food service industry and be a successful manager in a restaurant? So, what are the kind of things that you think?
I mean, like one thing I'm doing recently is I've been revisiting wine. Like I feel like I don't know as much as I should for how long I've been in the industry. I mean, I know more than the average person, but I should definitely know more. So like, it's one of those things. Like there are all sorts of things you can do online. Like there's different videos on YouTube. I made a cheat sheet using Grok of like what are the regions of France and different wines. Like I studied that repeatedly, and then like once you have the regions committed to memory, then you can do individual regions, regions within regions, chateaus, in France, in Italy, there's different sub-regions, all that. That's one thing. A lot of places require you have a food handler certificate. I would say I got that when I worked at Neta, but it's one of those things like you should get like if you're starting managing or applying, you get it through the health department here. It's been kind of annoying because I know they've been short staffed and it's harder to get an appointment, but like when I was at Neta, it was one of those things where like they kept getting on me to get it and I got it, but it's one of those things like if you're starting managing, you're definitely going to need it. So I would like try and get that as soon as you can, especially now with the staffing issues. Um, Courses online and stuff. I don't know. I mean, a lot of stuff I've just learned through experience. I don't really know. And then as far as people outside of the industry coming in, I don't know. I mean, I've known people who've gone to school for other things, worked as servers, and worked their way up to management. But I don't know. I don't know people who've managed other things and managed restaurants. I mean, I've seen that. I've seen that with the ownership, but I haven't. But that's like a different story because that's like, okay, they have money, they invest in a restaurant, they hire people, all that. So that's a little bit different of a situation. That has its problems too, which I can talk about if it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, tell us a bit about that. Like, so you think even at that level, even though you're relatively hands off, you think there's some particularities about the food service industry in and of itself that if you've owned something else that you wouldn't necessarily be able to pick up on some of those things. So for your experience, the more successful owners are people who've actually worked up through the food service industry.
Yeah, of course. Well, because here's the thing. The problem, and this has frustrated me since culinary school, honestly, is like I don't think people realize how difficult this industry is. And I think a lot of people think it's like playing house or like being on a game show or something. And well, I've seen it happen a lot where people with money open a restaurant, they think it's fun or whatever, and then they think like, okay, we can run it the way we want. But then as time progresses, they realize like, okay, this isn't as easy as we thought. There are a lot of unforeseen problems, all that. But because they didn't start and work their way up, they don't know. So like one thing I really like about my boss currently is that he not only worked in the kitchen, but he actually worked as a server and ended up buying the restaurant. So it's like because he's worked his
Oh,
way through all these, he worked his way through all these levels. He knows like, okay, what's required at every level. How do you deal with people? How do you deal with guests? How do you deal with like issues with the landlord? How do you deal with, certain maintenance things? How do you deal with slow times? Like, he has that experience. Whereas I've seen in other companies, like again, oh, we've made money and we'll just kind of figure it out on the fly. And it's like, it's not that easy. I mean, Thomas Keller, I know Keller has closed places. Danielle Boulud, who I used to work for, has closed several restaurants. Danny Meyer, a top restaurateur, he's closed several restaurants. And like, what kind of annoys me is like, okay, these are the most successful restaurateurs, and like in the case of Boulud, he was a chef. I mean, he was executive chef of Le Cirque. He won Michelin stars. He was chef of Danielle, and he opened his other places. Like these are people who've been in the industry for decades and reached the highest level. Like they've had failures. Like you coming in from some other background, you haven't figured out something that they've missed in decades of experience with all these restaurants. And it's like it's pretty arrogant to think like, oh, I can just figure out everything they did on the fly. And also the other thing too, again, won't mention names or places, but like there's a certain degree of luck too. Like maybe like if you're cooking a food that's trendy at the moment, like that's going to help your business a lot. Critics are maybe like tired of French food. There's some other ethnic food that's getting a lot of attention. You open a place that serves that, you're going to get a lot of business. If you have a talented chef, they're going to get a lot of attention. That's going to draw people in. But if the place is managed poorly, those problems are going to accumulate over time, and ultimately, I would argue, take the place down depending on the situation. So it's like you can't just wander in on the fly and figure everything out. Like again, if that were the case, these restaurants wouldn't fail at these rates, even amongst the most successful amongst us.
sure. Um, hmm. Oh yeah. So also you've had the experience now as a manager, and
Mhm.
of course you've already been working your way up to interview for the jobs. So
Yep.
from your experience, what are some things that you think could work better, or some suggestions you'd have for people hiring other people in the food service industry from you being on different aspects of it?
It's I mean, it can be tough because the problem is like a person can look good on paper and then not deliver in person. So that, that can be misleading. You have people who like for example, for me, like I look at longevity because my last job I left after 9 months, but I have several places I've been at for 2, 3 years. My Austrian guys, I mean, that was one company. I was with them for over three. I was at Batello for just shy of three. I was at Neta for over three. Bastianic is, if you add up Felidia and Babo, it was almost four. So it's like, for me, longevity is a big thing because it's like, okay, is this person going to stick around and grow, or are they just looking to get that little bit of experience and leave? So like, I look at that personally. You know, so I have two places on my resume that I was at less than a year, but it's like, one or two cases, okay, fine, it happens. But if it's like, a few months in every place, that's a bad sign. Um, if you ask people why they left and then like the stories don't add up or they're inconsistencies, I would be wary about that. Um, References, of course, do they have references? Like, for example, Pecora Bianca, they actually asked me for three references. I gave letters from Tanya and Solomon. I gave two other references. They actually called each person and had like a 10-minute conversation with both. So depending, they're very thorough about that, which, is good because they want to make sure like, okay, we're hiring someone. Um, the one thing from the applying standpoint that's tough is a lot of these bigger companies, they want to do multiple interviews. Like I said, I did four and got turned down still. So like, I mean, I get it from their point of view. Like they want different people in the company to meet you. They want to see maybe different locations, all that. The challenge, of course, with that is that if you're out of work, it can be a little stressful because you're waiting for
Yeah.
that person to get back to you and maybe they don't. I've had several first round interviews that go well, then they don't get back to me, or it's like, oh, we've decided to continue with someone else. I've had like two interviews, then it's, oh, we've decided to go with someone else. So it's like what's challenging, I think, especially where I've been applying, is if I'm applying at some of these higher places, it's not only nicer restaurants, but there's a lot more competition. So it's like me, like I can have a good interview, but I can be up against someone who's a bit more qualified and I don't know. So then that person gets picked. But like, it's tough because I don't see what goes on behind the scenes or who else they interview. So I think in general, just looking for things tailored to your background. Now, the advantage I had with this place is because it's a smaller restaurant, it was easier just like meet the owner, talk to him. Okay, I have a good impression, all that, do a trail. Okay, I'd like you to come on. Like that's easier to do on the fly. Whereas these other companies, it's like they love their multiple interviews, which again, I get from their point of view, but it can be tough if you're looking to work right away. So I don't think there's really a way around that. As you say, it's like better to look when you have a job because then at least like, okay, if they don't call back to you, whatever, it's not the end of the world. But if you're waiting and waiting for that interview, that next interview, that can be nerve wracking.
Yeah, then you'd have to schedule like the time to actually go and work at the place on your days off. But there's a chance because if it's
Yeah.
worthwhile, it can be a jump up on the thing. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So heading into the next question, which again is the most important question. This one you already answered it in the first one we had about this. So maybe the question is, do you like cheese? And if yes, which ones? And if no, you're a horrible person. But since Steven is not a horrible person, in fact, we've had series where you went to like a specific cheese place, Casalula. I was talking about different cheeses. So just tell us a bit. Is there some new cheese places you found in New York City since Casalula closed and so we've talked? Or is there some special cheese that you haven't had since then? Just tell us a bit about cheese since we last talked.
So it's been around a long time, but I want to check it out. In the West Village, there's a place called Murray's Cheese, and it's a pretty big shop. They have a lot of different varieties. I know. I think it's one of those you can buy. I don't know if you can eat there directly too, but like a lot of places get cheese from there. I want to check that out. They have all sorts of stuff. Like they have the aged, as Kyra would remind us, it's not Gouda, it's Gouda. They have like the aged one there that
It's
I really
good.
like. They as I think I was eating paneer for the last year or so, and the paneer came from milk made upstate near where I was from, which I thought was pretty cool. And then well, so I love mozzarella, of course. Where I'm going to be now is going to have mozzarella and burrata again. I love those. I think you said you like burrata too.
Yeah, burrata's amazing. Are they getting it from New York? Or are they shipping it in? I guess because they have like the water buffaloes in New York. You told me there's somewhere in New York that has water buffaloes, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like, but you have to pay that. Like, it's a little more expensive because you have to pay to have it imported. So a lot of places just go with the cow milk because it's cheaper.
Are you not
Um,
allowed? I thought you're allowed to raise water buffaloes in America, but probably not in New York. It's probably going to be tough. I know there's like some places in Texas where there's like a ranches where you can go and like hunt like all sorts of African and Asian and other sorts of like antelopes and uh, what are those ungulates and whatnot. So I'm assuming there's got to be some water buffalo farms in the United States of America where you can get the water buffalo milk itself and then make the mozzarella di bufala. Because yeah, in Italy, in most cases, if you're gonna get mozzarella, they even call it mozzarella di bufala because
Mhm.
it's from the buffalo, it's from the water buffalo. In general, most mozzarella, authentic mozzarella in Italy is from water buffaloes, which most people don't know. And like I talked about this in the first, we've talked about this before. When I first got to the United States of America, I was born in France, moved to Kenya, and got to the United States of America when I was like 10, 11. And we had the mozzarella sticks, so it's like the pill mozzarella, or you get the mozzarella on pizza. So when I finally got to Italy and I finally got the mozzarella there, it was like it's a whole different creature. It's way better than the stick one. But
Yeah.
it's like yeah. So yeah. Well, they don't have water buffaloes in. Let me check. Let me check while you're talking
It,
about that.
it it's a good question. It actually it hasn't come up. I'm sure someone somewhere for example, this company they used the paneer originally. It was from Ronnie Brook Farm, and that's interesting because it was actually in a nearby town near where I grew up, and I used to see it for sale in the stores. But recently, I guess they started using another farm upstate. I don't know which one, but I guess like the supposedly I guess the fat content is better because I guess if it's like a certain cow and they feed them a certain things, all that. Like I was telling wife that in season soon there's going to be something called breast chicken. I don't know if you know, it's BRESSE. It's French chicken. It's fed milk. I think they're fed milk pellets currently, and apparently the meat is super moist. And some people have said like you don't even need sauce with it. It's so moist you just eat it on its own. I know like Danielle, some of Danielle's restaurants serve it. I don't know, but like something like that where it's like okay, the animal's a certain way, it's raised a certain way that the product is exactly what they want. So I would imagine that even with certain cows like that make mozzarella, they probably it's like a certain breed. They probably feed them a certain diet, and like I'm sure they manage it a certain way to get the product that they want. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, you could
yeah.
definitely make it with yeah, you can make it with cow milk. So we're not saying you can't with them all. But okay, so I asked Brave, I used Brave, the AI,
Mhm.
whatever the Brave AI is called,
Mhm.
AI generated answers. So it says yes, there are water buffaloes in the United States that raise specifically for mozzarella production, though they remain relatively rare. Ramini Mozzarella in Tomales, California, is one of the most well-known U.S. producers, run by Craig and Audrey Ramini, who transitioned from Silicon Valley to cheese making. Good choice, guys. And their farm produces authentic buffalo mozzarella using milk from their own water buffalo herd. Other small scale producers and farms across the US also raising water buffaloes for dairy include Fading D in Salisbury, North Carolina since 2016, Appleton
Mhm.
ME Water Buffalo in Maine, Rocking TT Bar and Sarabella Buffalo Dairy in Colorado, Asbury Riverine Ranch in New Jersey, and Buffalo Valley Pastures Farm in Pennsylvania. So Jersey and Pennsylvania, that should be close enough to y'all to get some stuff in there if that's something that's
Yeah, I'm sure there are places that do. Oh, actually, the last company I worked for, they actually got the chicken for the butter chicken from Amish country.
okay.
Because I guess because they use it called it's called Green Circle chicken, and they're very big on sustainability. Like it's one of those things where I guess like the chickens are fed like leftover scraps from like vegetables and stuff. So like they're fed healthy stuff. They know what they eat, but at the same time you're using up everything.
I remember seeing something. I never actually watched the video, but it was like some click where some guy was going and he was going to like different restaurants and yeah, and he was just getting the food waste and scraps from the dinner and just he had a free range sort of thing and he just had this machine just dropping out the food scraps for all the chickens because chickens will eat anything. They will eat
Yeah,
anything you
yeah.
put in front of them. So we might as well put some decent stuff in front of them. Yeah, maybe that's why everything tastes like chicken because they've eaten everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the last question here is anything else to add about what you do? So we've talked about earnings a bit, cost benefit analysis, trade-offs, relationships, etc. Just anything you can think of. Yeah, like how do you think the relationship? Like, I think this is one specific thing that I think is good to mention. What were the relationships, the work environment while you were front of house or back of house at the lower level versus when you get to the managerial level? What is the relationship dynamics? Because I'm sure in some situations you like certain dynamics of okay, I'm working. I like how I work with the kitchen. I talk to the staff. What are some of the differences you think that happen when you go to managerial level that some people might not really understand? Or yeah, so yeah.
Well, I don't think it's a case of not understanding, but you have to draw the line on certain things. Like, for example, like I'm pretty much an open book about everything, but then, like, as a manager, you can't talk to employees about all the problems or like what you think of certain employees, because if that turns into like people gossiping, people say things about you that can be used against you at a later date. So, like, you can't say, "Oh, I don't like this person," because then like they find out and that creates a whole thing. Um, it's like fraternizing with employees like I was talking to my new boss about that recently, and I was saying how like I don't hang out with staff. Like that's not even just a company. That's like my personal rule. Like if it's like let's say we had a woman at Babo who was there like 20 something years. She left. Like I'll go out to that because that's like a send off for someone who's been there a while. But it's like I'm not regularly having drinks with them because that turns into like, oh, the manager is my friend. He's gonna let me do whatever I want. And I've seen it too. Like it's funny with me because my experience is I've had some vicious bosses and I don't want to be that person, but at the same time, like being buddy buddy doesn't work either because like people don't do what you want, they just do what they want. And then I've seen it happen too, where like a chef is buddy buddy, then he tries to be the authority, and then like no one listens to him because it's like, okay, what, you're tough all of a sudden? It's like it doesn't work. You have to lay down that law since early on, you know?
Can you think of anything that you thought like, okay, when you were still working front of house, where you're thinking, okay, if I was a manager, I would do this and that this way. And then once you became a manager, you realize like, okay, I can't actually do that. Like you thought before you were actually a manager, this is something you might be able to do. But then now that you became a manager, maybe you understand why managers weren't doing that or doing things in a specific way.
That's a good question. I was trying to think. I mean, it kind of relates to what I said about like needing systems and structure in place because I used to say like, oh, this is by the book, this is corporate, whatever, but then you realize like, no, you need that because you're protecting yourself, but you're also helping people improve. Like we talked about radical candor, and she talks about that a lot in the book too, because you're supposed to guide people and help them improve. That's part of your job. It's not just busting people for mistakes. So you need those systems in place, and I think one thing too is you have to risk the fact that like some people just won't like you. Like there are people that you get tough, they're either gonna get upset and leave, or they're gonna change accordingly. And then it's like you have to decide, okay, do you want to are the people going to change and work with you? Do you want to replace the people? Are you in an environment that's not conducive to all that or whatever? Like for example, to put in one perspective, I worked in a place where the my predecessor was a very nice guy, but he was very like buddy buddy with the staff. Like the staff were basically all his friends. And then the problem was that when I came in and I started implementing rules and things, they didn't like that because like they were used to having a manager who was their buddy. And then the lessons I kind of learned from that are number one, you can't really change people. People have to want to change themselves. And again, you have to make sure you're aligned on as far as management and ownership. So what I would have done differently in that situation was gone to the ownership and be like, look, here's what I've inherited. Here are the issues. How do you want me to proceed? Because I don't want people complaining I'm being a tyrant or whatever. But it's like, if they're so used to having an environment where the manager is their best friend, it's like, I can't just come in, implement all these rules, and everyone's just going to go along and change. Like people don't think that way. So like that's something I learned and would handle a bit differently going forward. So and I've talked to one of my former colleagues as well, and I think it's like I was a bit naive because I thought like, oh, I'll come in, I'll tighten with some rules, people will make more money, they'll be happy, they'll do what I want. It's like people don't always work that way. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many people are you going to be managing at this next position?
So it's a smaller place. I think there's usually like 2 to 4 sections. It's not huge. There's a bar. There's maybe like there's usually like one hostess. There's usually like two managers on. Sometimes the owner works. One of the reasons I got hired is he wants to pull back a bit because he's been working because he's been down a manager, but like he wants to focus on like brunch and like talking about a second location and other stuff. But like with me there, he can focus on those other things. So that's the current situation. Uh,
How many
last place.
tables?
It's a smaller location. I mean, I think it's maybe trying to think if it's 10 tables. It's pretty small, but it's like it's one of those where like the tables will also can be split though. So it's either like a few big tables or you split them and do two and two. And then there's like an upstairs, there's like a private dining room. We do like for example, like there was a pharmaceutical meeting, they set up a projector and do it on the wall. We did that a lot at like Batello as well as UA Foods.
When stuff like that happens for you at the manager level, it's pretty much hands off. Once you've prepped it, the people manage it themselves. It's not that much
Well,
different.
yeah,
It's not
so
like
so we have one of the managers does events, so it's usually like there's a whole contract, they agree in advance, there's so much per person, there's an admin fee. there's usually someone assigned just to that event, and then we just make sure like, okay, they get what they want. The servers do what they're supposed to as far as allergies and any restrictions, things like that. Uh,
I think another question that would be good for my interest and I think other people's interest is the work-life balance that goes on here, where this is a typical thing. Like I've been a lecturer, I've had a few, mostly been self-employed, freelance designing and things like that. So I have some experience in more straight jobs. Like one was a part-time lecturer at a university here, where the whole thing that balance where it's like, okay, you're in school for a certain amount of time, but then you got to do homework, you got to do all the tests, you got to prep the stuff. So when it comes to your managerial level, if you're front of house, back of house, you're waiter, you're dealing with the people for that hours you're on the clock. You're not really dealing with stuff off the clock. So how much off the clock work is there for what you do? Your experience as a manager that you're expecting to have at this job? Like, let's say for an average day you'd be on job is you have to get there. How much earlier before the opening do you have to get there? How much after do you have to stay? Your time off, like what's the actual full hour expectation for your experience?
So I have to start at 2, and I would get the restaurant closes like 9:30. It's not too late. Where it's located, it's not really like a late night spot. Like it's in a location where it's like there are a few bars, but it's usually just like people who are in the area who just like want to drink and want to go home. My last job was kind of like that too. Like it's not like a cool spot to hang out late at night. Like the West Village, East Village are more like that, but like some of these other areas, it's more if you have bars, it's more like, okay, someone's coming home, they want to have a drink, they know their neighborhood bartender, then they go home. They're not partying till 2 in the morning every night. So that's not too bad. And then as far as outside of work, I don't know. I mean, my last few jobs, I was answering emails and stuff when I was outside. It depends on the place. Like some places are big on we don't want you to work from home. We want a work life balance. Other places, it's like, no, you have to, we expect you to respond to emails right away. I don't know yet. I mean, I tend to respond to things right away. For me, it's more of like a personal thing of like, if I put things aside, I forget or I get distracted. So like, I'd rather just take care of something, and then it's like, oh, thanks for getting back to me. It's not like, okay, you forgot to respond to my email from the other night. Um, but I don't know yet. I mean, companies talk more and more about work-life balance now. Whether they follow through on that, I guess, depends on the company. Because if you go on Glassdoor, for example, you can read reviews of certain companies, and there's certain companies they've said like work-life balance is poor. Like, oh, they said they'd give me 2 days off. I ended up doing 6-day weeks. Oh, I had to answer all these emails on my day off. So then, if you add up all that stuff, it ends up being more than what they said. But that's also the downside of being salaried is like they work you when they want, whereas hourly they only make you work so much because they don't want to pay you for those extra hours. So like if you were getting paid hourly, they wouldn't say, "Hey, do these things outside of work." Because then the person would say,
Yeah.
"I should be paid for that." And they don't want to pay it. And then if they can start a thing because there have been legal issues with that too. Like, oh, I was made to do this work and I wasn't paid for it, so that can start a thing. Or if you do pay them for it, well, then you're gonna pay a fortune in overtime because they're going to be doing all this stuff outside of work. So that's another issue.
Yeah, this is the trade-offs that you have to factor in. But
Yeah.
in the first conversation we had with you, it was more food service. You had talked about some experience you had working, I think it was like a fish kind of place or dealing with the food. So at the managerial level that you're in, is part of your responsibilities like managing like the shopping for the kitchen, or is that handled by the chef or like the head chef, or how much of that you're also involved in? Like the shopping, are you handling like the decor of like the front of house, or the changing things on the menu, like, or is it the managerial pretty much just dealing with the employees and the customers while the restaurant is open? Like, is that pretty much what most of what you're doing?
So it depends on the position, but like for my last job, for example, as GM, I actually did get to go to profit and loss meetings, and I got to see like, okay, what were sales like this year? What were they like last year? What month by month? What are some areas for improvement? What are some things that have to change? Now, last place, the kitchen did the ordering themselves, but like they would kind of say like, okay, here's how our food cost is. We got to get that lower. Now it's up to the chef, to manage that, but like just so I have a perspective on what that is. And then of course that's a challenge too. I think we talked about it in the seasonal discussion, but the challenge of like when you go to especially to the higher end level, that the more interesting food definitely costs more. Like even though you're charging more on the menu, you're still paying for expensive ingredients. There's a lot of waste and all that. So it's kind of weighing like ideally what do you want to do versus realistically what can you do. So that's a challenge too, because like I knew someone who worked at La Esquina, which is a Mexican place. They own several locations, and food cost is super low because you think about it, it's like cheap cuts of meat, rice and beans, all that, and then it's like you're making a ton of money on margaritas,
Yeah.
tequila, all that. So it's like you're making a fortune off alcohol, and the food is cheap but marked up a lot. Whereas you go to somewhere like Danielle, you have all these have a lot of stuff gets thrown out. Like, you can only serve these micro carrots if they're cut the exact same way. You can have, so it's like there are all these things like that to consider. So again, you have to kind of weigh that like, okay, we want to make money, but like, here's our ideal. And if we want those Michelin stars, this is what we have to do. So it's weighing all those considerations. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I think we're done with the main section of this. So now it goes to the last three questions. Do you have any questions for me from this conversation we've had or anything in general?
Sure. Was there anything in this conversation that surprised you? I mean, you and I have talked a lot, but was there anything that was really like surprising for you?
Mm, trying to remember. I'm like my old man memories already going because there was a part where I was like, oh no, that's kind of different. Was it there? Actually, there was a thing that I can't really recall right now because there was a time I was like, oh, that doesn't happen in that kind of thing. I was like, oh, okay, well, so I should have actually thought that that was not the way it is. Um, but yeah, no, I can't really think of anything so far.
It might come to you later if you
Yeah,
watch
but
the
I'll
video,
bring you
probably.
back if
Yeah.
it
Well,
is. Yeah, we might
that's
have an
okay. Yeah, sure.
addendum on this.
Sure.
Yeah, and we'll
Sure.
probably have you back on maybe after you've been at this place. He's starting next week, so maybe in like a
Yeah.
month in, you can come on and just tell us, just like a latch on. Because even with this series, I want to figure out a system where to bring people on for like follow-ups. Like we had our friend K, our friend K. Was he K or Che? Is it K? Is he K?
He goes by Shay. His name is
Shay.
Steve, but yeah, that was
Yeah.
his. Yeah.
I guess I even the Che Guevara shirts, like we saying
Yeah.
K. I remember K rated Shay. Yeah, he had like a food truck that kind of went down. So we want to bring him back on also just to have a kind of like a review of that and see how he's doing. But then now the next one, do you have any questions for anybody else that may be part of this? Like, yeah.
Let's see. Let's see. Was there anything in this interview that relates to your line of work? I've only worked in food service, so I'm always curious learning about other lines of work because I can't really compare it to anything else. Yeah.
Okay. Now with that question,
That's
why
one. Yeah.
the part of why I included this one is because with the next question is would you like to take a random or requested question? If Stephen has put that question out there, when I ask other people if they say they would like a requested question or one of the questions, a random question, they can take like Stephen's question and they could ask them that and they can answer because I want to get this thing kind of connected where if a job is mentioned here or if a person is mentioned here, just like Kay was mentioned here, Che was mentioned here, you can click from this video or get a link somehow wherever you're watching this. I'll try to have links below somewhere where you can also get to those other things. I kind of want to do like a this connection to show like how connected we are. How some things are similar, some things are different. So yeah, with this one, would you like to take a random question? I don't have any random questions. Don't have any requested questions right now. Or we can do like a random hypothetical and we can see what comes from there.
Yeah, you could do that if you'd like. I mean, I don't,
Okay,
obviously this interview is not up yet, so we don't, know what
let's
people
just
think.
take a hypothetical here. Let's get a random one, and then we'll see. We can do it like you can answer it now or come back on the follow-up video and answer it or just post it separately. Okay, the moon fight. I feel like I've done this one before. I don't know how it is. Okay, a total stranger picks a fight with you in a bar. This stranger is exactly your size, weight. You have done nothing to this individual to warrant such animosity, but the stranger really wants to fight you and make matters weirder, this stranger wants to fight you on the moon, and this is somehow possible. You and this stranger will be transported to the surface of the moon, outfitted in ultra thin and very comfortable spacesuits, and rigged with lightweight oxygen tanks. You will be expected to fight for 10 3-minute rounds. You can't use weapons, and there are no rules. And you cannot quit unless you or your opponent are knocked unconscious. Do you accept this challenge? And if yes, what is your moon fighting strategy?
Hmm. I think yes, because it'd be quite the experience. And as as far as strategy, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really been in fights, but just kind of go with what I think is best. I mean, I don't know how that would turn out, but
Yeah, no, I'm wondering like for me, like yes, maybe it just now depends. Like because now I'm thinking with this one, if this is true and we can get to the moon, we can be transported to the moon. It seems like unless this is like Elon Musk challenging you or someone, it seems like at this point traveling to the moon is not going to be
Mm.
an exorbitant thing. It's going to be like air flight now, where it's like you pretty much accessible to like middle class people around the world, even lower class. If you save up some time, you get cheaper flights. It seems like it'd be a regular thing to do. So it wouldn't be something where like, oh, I'm just going to the moon, because there'd be other things to do. And I'm thinking that kind of world would have a lot cooler things to do than fight someone on the moon, even right now. But I don't know.
Mm.
And I'm wondering, would grappling work on the moon? Or is that kind of a thing with the lower gravity? What kind of fight style would kind of work on the moon? Because I had like personal experience with like wrestling, like in high school, so it's not like professional, not like gone past. I train a bit in the boxing. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what my moon fighting strategy would be. So yeah, somebody asked it. People out there who are more into like fighting mixed martial arts or some special thing, what do you think is like a fighting strategy that would work well on the moon? I'm kind of going like gun Battle Angel Alita. Like I read the manga, which it goes into like different things. Like Panzer Kunst is like a style developed on Mars because of like the gravity and whatnot and the thing, and the how it translates to the thing. So how would people have to factor in your movements on the moon versus that? But of course, like one of the easiest things, all the rules are there. My strategy is probably just grapple the person and then pull out their oxygen canister so they can tap out and quit as soon as possible. Because I wouldn't like if I decided that how to actually get into the fight with the person, I don't think I'd be in a situation where it's like this person challenged me, so I'm gonna risk whatever this person can do to me,
Mm.
assuming the same size and style. Like now, that's saying, do they know more fighting styles than I do? If we know the similar fighting styles, if we have the same fighting styles but different mentality, because I wouldn't challenge someone who's my size and weight and like let's go fight. So they have some different mentality. So just assuming they're already more of an instigator, I would want to take them out as soon as possible, and that would probably head to their oxygen tank and get them to tap out, rather than risk the fight going longer and me sustaining some sort of injury on that. So I think probably some kind of grapple to the tank. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it for now. Thanks for joining in this, Stephen. As per usual, enjoy the conversations that we have. And like I said, I'll have you back on. The next one is probably going to be about his getting married in New York City in current timeline, because there's too much negativity out there about how you can't find a woman, or you can't be happy, or it's too expensive, or this and that, or the city's not the great place for this and this. It's like, no, uh,
Mm.
Steven is rather atypical when the average person thinks of a New Yorker, but he's having enjoying himself. I keep asking him sometimes something will happen. I'll see something in the news and be like, "Why are you still there?" But he's enjoying his life there. He's found his niche there, and this is one thing I even told people. Like, even though New York City is as massive as it is, it's still like 20 million people in the greater New York City area. So even if it's like, even if there's something about New York that you see a generalization and it applies to like 80% of the people, that means there's still a good 4 million people that are not like that. It's still like a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
people. So you can still find different things. You don't have to be just like your typical whatever it is in that place in order to find your space there. So he'll come back on for that. But anything else you want to say to the people before we check out on this one?
No, really, it was another good discussion, I think.
Yeah. Okay. That's it, guys, gals, and everybody else in between. Thank you again, Stephen. Goodbye.
Goodbye bye.